The motel where no humans survive after night, only shadows. The rain wasn't pouring from the sky that night. It seemed as if the entire sky was throwing bloody screams at the ground. There were no cars on Highway 66 for miles. Only a black SUV was moving forward, tearing through the darkness. Sitting at the steering wheel, Ethan Carter was constantly looking anxiously in the rearview mirror. 3 times in the past 10 minutes, he had felt as if a car was following them, but each time there was only darkness behind. Emma Collins, who was sitting next to him, was silent. Her eyes were fixed out the window. The trees in the forest were shaking in the rain as if hundreds of tall people were standing on the side of the road watching them. Suddenly, a terrifying noise began to come from the SUV's radio. Krrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr "Ethan, turn off the radio." Ethan immediately turned off the radio, but the sound didn't stop. It was still audible. Inside the car, right behind them, turned back. Ethan immediately slammed on the brakes. The car skidded onto the road. At that moment, a humanoid shadow appeared in front of the headlights. Tall, unnaturally thin, and its face was completely submerged in darkness. Bang! The car hit the thing. Emma screamed loudly. The SUV swerved to the side of the road and stopped. There was complete silence for a few seconds. Only the sound of the rain. Ethan got out, shivering. "Hello?" No answer. The road was empty. No blood. No body. Just the wet road. And strange footprints in the mud. They weren't human footprints. Each footprint had only 3 long fingers. Emma also came out. Where did he go? Suddenly, the sound of children laughing came from inside the forest. Both of them immediately fell silent. At 2:30 in the morning, inside the deserted forest, children's voices. Then there was some movement between the trees. Several white faces appeared in the darkness for a few seconds, and then they disappeared. Emma held Ethan's arm tightly. "We have to get out of here." Ethan tried to start the car, but the engine had stopped. On the 3rd try, the car started, and as soon as the headlights came back on, an old sign appeared on the other side of the road. Rusty, half-broken, on which was written in red, "Black Hollow Motel." There was something else written in small letters under the board, but this time it was clearly visible. "Check-in is easy. Check-out is not." A cold wave ran through Emma's body. "No, we won't stop here." But at that moment the car stopped again. And this time it was completely silent. The rain intensified. Lightning flashed in the distant sky. And in that 1 second of light, they saw several human figures standing on top of the motel. They were all standing on the roof, silent, and looking straight down at them. The electricity disappeared. The darkness returned. "Did you see?" Emma's voice was trembling. Ethan couldn't say anything. The two of them quickly moved towards the motel. As they approached the reception, the door creaked open on its own. There was a strong stench inside, a rotten dampness, and something that smelled like corpses. Behind the reception sat an old man, very old, so old that his skin was peeling off in places. But the scariest thing was his eyes. They were completely black. There was no white in them. The old man smiled slowly, and his smile became excessively long. Human faces don't open that much. "Welcome to the Black Hollow Motel." His voice was like several people speaking at once. "I was waiting for you too." Emma immediately backed away. You know us?" The old man laughed. "This place calls to those who are already dead." Silence fell. The sound of the rain seemed to have stopped. Ethan, controlling himself, said, "We will only stay 1 night." The old man slowly pushed the register towards him. "Write down the names." Ethan opened the register, and his hands began to tremble. There were hundreds of names written on each page. But one thing was strange. With each name was a date of birth and a date of death, and the date of death of all the people. The night they entered the motel, Emma closed the register in fear. "We will not stay here." She ran towards the door, but the door had disappeared. The place was now just a wall. Emma screamed, This. The old man stood up slowly. His bones were making sounds like they were breaking. It's too late now. Then he placed an old key on the table. The number hanging next to the key seemed to be written in blood. Room 13. Suddenly, a woman's terrifying scream was heard from the second floor above. Then silence. Then the sound of dragging, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "Ethan, please, we have to get out of here." The old man leaned closer to them and whispered, "After midnight, this motel comes alive." At that moment, the lights in the entire motel went out. Only a red bulb at the end of the corridor began to light up. And in that dim red light, several people appeared standing. Tall, crooked, and inhuman. They were all silently looking at Ethan and Emma. Then simultaneously their faces began to smile. Unnaturally wide smiles. Emma screamed. But the next moment they were all gone. Only the empty corridor remained. The old man said slowly, "They've woken up. The door to room 13 doesn't open after midnight. It breathes on its own." There was complete silence in the corridor. Such silence in which a person can even hear their own heartbeat. Emma and Ethan were moving towards the second floor. With each step, the wooden floor creaked, as if groaning not from someone's weight, but from pain. The light from the red bulb was making strange shadows on the walls. But after a few moments, Ethan stopped. Those shadows weren't moving with the two of them. They were moving of their own accord. Emma also noticed. A shadow on the wall was slowly moving towards them, while there was no one in the corridor. "Ethan?" Her voice became dry. "That shadow." Suddenly, the entire wall shook violently. And the next moment, the shadow separated from the wall and fell to the floor. It had now become a humanoid thing. Long arms, crooked neck, and its face in complete darkness. Only its smile was visible, inhumanly long. Emma screamed. The thing ran towards them on four legs like an animal. Ethan immediately grabbed Emma's hand. "Run!" The two started running down the corridor. From behind they could hear the sound of the thing's nails rubbing against the wood. Scrarach! The thing was approaching them at an extraordinary speed. Emma looked back, and a scream escaped her throat. The creature was now walking upside down on the ceiling. Its neck was twisted a full 180 degrees, and its black eyes were looking straight at Emma. Suddenly, the door to room 13 at the end of the corridor opened automatically. It was completely dark inside. Ethan and Emma immediately rushed inside and closed the door. The next moment, something outside hit the door with full force. Bang! The whole room shook. Emma started crying. What was that? Scratching sounds began to come from the other side. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It sounded like someone was eating wood with their nails. Then, silence. A few seconds later, black smoke started coming in from under the door. The smoke started spreading on the floor and slowly began to take on the shape of a human. Emma's breathing stopped. The thing turned out to be a little girl, about 7 years old. White frock, long black hair, and her face was bent down. "Mommy." The little girl's voice echoed in the room. Emma's face went pale. "No." She started to back away. "This can't be." The little girl slowly lifted her face up, and Emma screamed. It was her dead little sister, Sophie. But her eyes were gone. Only black, empty sockets. Sophie smiled, and black water began to flow from her mouth. "You left me alone." Emma started to cry hysterically. "No, I didn't leave you." Sophie slowly moved towards her. "You heard me screaming that night." The temperature in the room suddenly began to drop. Ice began to form on the walls. Ethan immediately pulled Emma back. "This is not Sophie." Suddenly, the girl's body began to twist in a strange way. The sounds of bones breaking echoed throughout the room. Crack, crack, crack. In a few seconds, her body became like a four-legged animal. Then she opened her jaw to an inhuman extent, and inside her mouth, dozens of human hands were moving. "Stay with us." The thing lunged at Emma at full speed. Ethan picked up a nearby lamp and threw it at it. The girl hit the wall and turned into black smoke while screaming. The room was silent again. Only the sound of Emma's crying remained. Suddenly, the TV turned on automatically. There was noise on the screen. Then the picture cleared. This time the video was live. The two of them were seen in the same room on the screen, but there was a difference in the video. Behind them, there was someone under the bed. A long finger was slowly coming out. A cold wave ran through Ethan's body. "Emma," he said in a trembling voice. "Get away from the bed." Emma immediately looked down. It was completely dark under the bed. But in that darkness, two white eyes opened. Then, a smile. The same inhuman smile. The thing under the bed slowly began to come out. First its long hands came out. Then the crooked head. And then its whole body. It was at least 8 feet tall. Its skin was like a burned corpse. And its face. There was no nose, no eyes, nothing on the face. Just a huge, slitted mouth that was constantly smiling. The clock in the room suddenly struck 12:13 a.m. And the creature made its first sound. A sound that was somewhere between human and animal. You watched the tape. Emma started to tremble. What does it want? The creature slowly started to move towards them. Now, you belong to the motel. Suddenly the walls of the entire room started to shake. The plaster started to fall, and hundreds of hands started to come out from inside the wall. Bloody hands. Some small, some burned, some had broken nails. They were all trying to catch Emma and Ethan. Emma screamed and backed away, but her foot hit something. She fell to the floor, and the wood broke under her. He looked down, and his soul trembled. There were hundreds of corpses under the floor. Decomposed corpses. Some had their eyes open. Some had their mouths frozen in fear. And in the middle of them all, standing there was the old receptionist. But he no longer looked human. His body had grown unnaturally long. His neck reached the ceiling, and his dark eyes were looking straight at Emma. Then he smiled and said, "Room 13 is always hungry." Suddenly, all the corpses opened their eyes at once. And the next moment, they all started reaching out to Emma. The basement contained the thing that lived in human skin. Emma's scream echoed throughout the room. Hundreds of rotting corpses under the floor were reaching out their hands towards her. Some had broken nails, some had half-eaten faces, and some had eyes that were still moving like living humans. "Help us." Dozens of voices echoed at once. Emma tried to back away, but a dead hand grabbed her ankle, cold as ice. She screamed with all her might. "Ethan!" Ethan immediately rushed towards her. He picked up a nearby piece of wood and hit the dead hand hard. Crack! There was a sound of bone breaking. The hand fell apart and fell to the ground. But the next moment, dozens of other hands came out. They all started pulling Emma down at once. The old receptionist was standing below in the darkness laughing. But now his laughter didn't sound human. It felt like several corpses were laughing at the same time. "They want to keep you with them." Suddenly the lights in the room began to blink rapidly. And each time it got dark, the 8-foot-tall creature seemed closer to them. Flash. It was by the wall. Flash. Now near the bed. Flash. Now only a few steps away. Its slit mouth opened wider, and several rows of human teeth appeared inside. "Don't let it touch you," Ethan screamed. Suddenly the entire building shook violently. The mirror on the wall fell to the floor and shattered. But as soon as Emma's eyes fell on the broken glass, a cold wave ran through her body. It wasn't just the two of them in the mirror. Behind them, dozens of shadows stood in the room, silent, unmoving, and all of their faces were covered in blood. Emma immediately looked back. The room was empty, but they were all still there in the mirror. Then one of those shadows slowly moved forward and pulled its hand out from inside the glass. Emma screamed, "Ethan!" Suddenly, all the shadows inside the mirror started to come out at once. Long hands, bent bones, and burning eyes. Ethan immediately grabbed Emma's hand. "We have to get out of here." The two ran towards the door. But as soon as the door opened, the corridor had disappeared. In its place was only a long dark staircase going down, towards the basement. Strange sounds were coming from below. The clanking of chains, the sounds of people crying, and the sound of something heavy being dragged. Suddenly the creature behind him screamed in horror. The whole room shook. "Go down!" The sound hit the walls. Emma's ears started bleeding. It wants to send us down. Suddenly, all the hands on the floor started moving towards them at once. Ethan made a decision immediately. Run. The two ran towards the stairs. As soon as they started going down, from behind, the creature also started crawling on the walls and following them. Scratch. Her nails were scraping the concrete. The lower she went in the basement, the air was getting colder. And the smell, it was unbearable. The mixed smell of rotting bodies and blood. Emma felt nauseous. At the end of the stairs was a long hall. Chains were hanging from the ceiling, and strange sentences were written in blood on the walls. The motel feeds. Don't trust the mirrors. IT wears their skin. Suddenly, a woman's voice was heard crying. Help me. Emma stopped immediately. At the end of the hall, a woman was sitting chained. Blonde hair, blood-stained clothes, and frightened eyes. Please get me out of here. Ethan slowly approached her. Who are you? The woman started to tremble. I came here 3 years ago. This place doesn't let humans in. Suddenly, she looked back in fear. It's coming. A dragging sound came from the other end of the hall. Drag, drag, drag. Something was moving in the darkness. Then a very long humanoid shadow appeared. Its body was covered in the skin of different humans. Someone's arm was a different color. Someone's face was half rotted, and there were dozens of human eyes on its chest. They were all alive and moving. Emma's body went limp. What the hell? The thing slowly moved towards them. And then, one eye on its body turned towards Emma. The next moment, the creature spoke in Emma's voice. Ethan, help me. Then in Ethan's voice. Emma, run. Then dozens of other voices. Screams. Crying sounds. The last sobs of the dying. They were all coming out of the creature's body. The chained woman began to scream hysterically. Don't let it touch your face. But it was too late. The creature suddenly reached in front of Ethan within human speed, and it placed its hand on Ethan's face. Ethan screamed in pain. Ah! His skin began to melt. It felt like someone was taking off his face. Emma ran towards him screaming, but at that moment, the chained woman suddenly started laughing. A terrible, inhuman laugh. Emma stopped immediately. The woman slowly raised her head, and her face split in two. It was completely dark inside, and in that darkness, hundreds of teeth were chattering. Found you. The entire basement shook together, and suddenly all the lights went out. Only in the darkness, dozens of white eyes opened, and then footsteps began to sound from all directions. They were not alone. Midnight guests were those who couldn't leave the motel even after they died. The basement was completely dark. The only sound was the sound of water dripping from rusty pipes. Tap, tap, tap. Emma's breathing was uncontrollable. She couldn't see anything. But one thing was clear. They weren't alone. Dozens of breaths could be heard in the darkness. Slow, heavy, and inhuman. Suddenly, someone whispered right next to Emma's ear. Don't look at them. Emma jumped in fear. She immediately backed away. But there was no one there. Then, a dim yellow light came on. Only one. In the middle of the basement. And in that light, those things appeared. The life drained from Emma's body. Dozens of people stood silently. Men, women, children, all dressed in different eras. Someone was wearing an 80s jacket. Someone was in a military uniform. And some looked so old that they had been here for decades. But they all had one thing in common. Their eyes were completely black. And they had the same inhuman smile on their faces. Midnight guests. They were all looking at Emma at the same time. Without blinking. Without moving. Ethan was lying on the ground. He was moaning in pain. The skin on his face was burned in places. Ethan. Emma ran towards him. But as soon as she got close to him, he grabbed Emma's hand and slowly lifted his face up. Emma screamed. One of Ethan's eyes had gone completely black, just like all those people. Emma, his voice was changing, as if someone else was speaking inside him. It's inside my head. Suddenly, all the midnight guests bowed their heads together, and a heavy voice echoed in the basement. The feast begins. At that moment, all the chains hanging from the ceiling began to shake. Clang, clang, clang. The temperature in the room suddenly dropped. Smoke began to come out of Emma's mouth. Then, the midnight guests slowly started walking towards them. Their movements were unnatural, like broken dolls moving. Bones were twisting, necks were crooked, but their smiles kept getting bigger. Run! Emma picked up Ethan. The two ran towards the other side of the basement. Hundreds of footsteps began to sound from behind. Thump, thump, thump. They were all following them. Suddenly, a door appeared at the end of the hall. An old iron door, on which was written in blood, "Staff only." Ethan opened the door with all his might. The two of them entered and closed the door. The next moment, dozens of objects outside started hitting the door. Bang! Bang! The whole room started shaking. Emma looked around. It was an old security room. There were dozens of CCTV screens on the walls. And the surprising thing, all the cameras were still running. But what was visible on the screens? The human mind could not bear it. On one screen, a family was having dinner. Then suddenly everyone's faces exploded, and black worms started coming out of them. On the other screen, a man was standing in front of a mirror. Then his reflection suddenly smiled and poked his eyes out. On the third screen, room 13 was visible, but the room was not empty. Emma and Ethan were there, but not the real ones. Something else. They were standing in the form of the two of them, and were slowly smiling at the camera. Emma's hands started shaking. They are not us. Suddenly, the old receptionist appeared on one screen. He was looking straight into the camera. Then he said softly, "The motel makes copies of every guest and eats the real person." The screen suddenly turned off. At that moment, the old radio in the corner of the room turned on automatically. After a loud noise, a woman's voice was heard. "If you're listening to this, there's still time." The voice was breaking. "The motel is alive. It feeds on the fear of humans, and the midnight guests are the people who died here." Suddenly, a scream was heard on the radio, then the sound of a gunshot, and silence. Emma looked at Ethan in fear. "How are we going to get out of here?" Ethan was silent. He continued to stare at the wall. "Ethan?" He spoke slowly. "They're calling me." A cold shiver ran through Emma's body. "Who?" Ethan smiled softly, and his other eye also went black. "The guests." Suddenly his body started to shake. His bones started to twist. Crack. Crack. Emma screamed. "No!" Ethan grabbed his head. "They're inside me." Suddenly, he hit his head on the wall with all his strength. Bang! Blood spread on the wall. But he didn't stop. Bang! Bang! Emma kept trying to stop him, but the next moment, Ethan suddenly fell silent. A few seconds later, he slowly lifted his face up and smiled. That same inhuman smile. "Emma," his voice was no longer his own. "Why don't you stay forever?" Suddenly, all the TVs in the security room turned on at once. Each screen showed only one thing: Emma. But each screen showed her death differently. In one, she was burning. In another, her face was being scratched. And in one screen, she was gouging her own eyes out. Then the words appeared on all the screens at once. "Checkout denied." At that moment, all the sounds outside the security room door suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Emma's breathing stopped. They all left. Then, blood slowly started to seep in from under the door. And in that blood, a sentence was written with a finger. "He is not Ethan anymore." The next moment, Ethan, standing behind Emma, started laughing. Every reflection in the mirror hall was alive, and they killed real humans. Only Ethan's laughter echoed in the security room. That laughter. That didn't sound human. Emma slowly backed away. Her hands were shaking. "Ethan?" She cried out in fear. But the person standing in front of her no longer seemed to be Ethan. His head was tilted unnaturally to one side, and both of his eyes had turned completely black. It seemed as if there was a void inside them. Then, he slowly smiled, and the corners of his mouth began to open excessively. There was a sound of skin cracking. Crack. Blood began to drip from his chin. Emma? His voice became like the voices of many people. They showed me the truth. Emma's breath caught. You're not Ethan? Suddenly Ethan turned his neck a full 180 degrees. The sound of bones breaking echoed throughout the room. Crack. And then, he ran towards Emma at full speed. Run. Emma ran towards the door screaming. As soon as she opened the door, the basement had disappeared outside. In its place was a long hall, and there were hundreds of mirrors on both walls of that hall. Mirror hall. Emma entered. Ethan's inhuman scream was heard from behind. The door closed automatically. Suddenly, the entire hall became silent. Only Emma's rapid breathing. She moved forward slowly, and then she looked at the mirrors. Not every reflection was normal. In one mirror, she was crying. In another, her face was covered in blood. And in one mirror, she wasn't moving at all, just standing there smiling. Emma immediately backed away, but then she saw something else. All the reflections were not in sync with her movements. They were moving of their own accord. Suddenly, in the mirror on the left, the reflection slowly raised its hand, while the real Emma didn't. A cold wave ran through Emma's body. Reflection smiled. Then she wrote something with her finger on the inside of the glass. Don't trust him. Emma's breath stopped. What? Suddenly, the lights in the entire hall started blinking. Flash. The reflections in all the mirrors looked at Emma at once. Flash. Now everyone was smiling. Flash. And the next moment, all the reflections started hitting their hands on the mirrors. Bang. Bang. The mirrors started shaking. Emma backed away screaming. Then one of the mirrors broke. Crash. And something like Emma came out of it. She looked exactly like Emma. Same face, same clothes, but her eyes were completely black, and her lips were smiling excessively long. You are the copy. She spoke slowly. Emma started trembling. No. Suddenly, the other mirrors started breaking too. Crash. 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 And different reflections started coming out of each mirror. Someone's face was burned, someone's neck was twisted upside down, and some of their bodies were completely covered in blood. But everyone was repeating the same words. The real one must die. They all slowly started moving towards Emma. Emma started running. The mirror hall was not ending. Only mirrors everywhere, and scary reflections in each mirror. Suddenly, she saw Ethan in a mirror. The real Ethan. He was screaming from inside. Emma, help me. Emma immediately went closer to that mirror. Ethan. She placed her hand on the mirror. The next moment, Ethan inside the mirror suddenly smiled, and his face started melting. The skin began to fall down, and the same black creature appeared from inside. Found you. The glass cracked loudly. The thing came out. Now it was in the form of Ethan, but its hands had grown unusually long. It immediately grabbed Emma's throat. Emma began to gasp for air. The creature slowly leaned closer to her and whispered, "The motel copies your soul first, then it wears your body." Tears began to flow from Emma's eyes. Suddenly, a door opened at the end of the hall. A bright white light came in, and with that light, a child's voice was heard. "Emma, wake up." The creature suddenly stopped. Then she looked at the light in fear. For the first time, she looked scared. The next moment, he threw Emma hard against the wall, and all the reflections started screaming. No! She's waking up. The entire mirror hall started shaking. The glasses started breaking one by one. Emma ran towards the bright door in an injured state. Dozens of reflections were running after her from behind. Thump! 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 She had almost reached the door, when suddenly someone grabbed her ankle. Emma fell to the ground. She looked back, then dozens of hands had come out of the floor, and between them, the real Ethan was there, but only half of his body. It felt like the floor was swallowing her. "Emma," he said in pain, "don't let it take your face." Suddenly, two white eyes opened in the darkness behind him, and a terrifying voice rang out. "Midnight is over." the entire hall was plunged into complete darkness. And then, something touched Emma's face. Room 66 was full of people alive whose skins had been peeled off years ago. Emma's screams faded into the darkness. As soon as that unknown object touched her face, she felt her skin burning, not from fire, but from some icy poison. Suddenly, the entire mirror hall disappeared, and, the next moment, Emma found herself lying on an old bed. She sat up, panting. The room was silent, very silent, so silent that even her own breathing felt strange. Black moisture spread over the walls. Water was dripping from the ceiling. Tap, tap, tap. Emma immediately touched her face. She could still feel her own skin, but she felt the mark of another hand on her cheek, as if someone had pressed her skin from the inside. Then, the old radio in the corner of the room turned on automatically. Krrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr room 66. Emma's heart beat fast. Who is it? There was silence for a few seconds. Then the same voice came again, but this time closer. They'll take your face. Emma immediately looked at the door. There was a rusty plate on the door. Room 66. A cold wave ran through her body. How did I get here? Suddenly, there was the sound of someone walking outside the door. Tick, 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 slow, shuffling footsteps. Then, blood started to flow in from under the door. Emma immediately backed away. Blood slowly spread to the floor. And then words began to form in that blood. Don't open the door. The next moment, there was a loud knock on the door. Bang! Emma screamed. Then a second. Bang! Then a third. This time so loud that the entire door shook. And then, Ethan's voice came from outside. Emma opened the door. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. Ethan? She immediately went closer to the door. But as soon as she grabbed the handle, the radio screamed. No! The entire room shook. And the next moment, someone's fingers started to come in from under the door. Long, bloody, and their skin was half peeled off. Emma backed away in fear. Ethan outside spoke again. Emma, please? But now his voice was changing, as if several people were speaking at once. Let us in. Suddenly, the sound of fingernails scraping began on the other side of the door. Scratch. Then, something peeked its eye from under the door. Emma's soul trembled. It was not a human eye. It was completely white. And inside it, dozens of small eyes were moving. Suddenly, the door began to shake violently. Bang! 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 Then silence. A few seconds later, a soft laugh began to sound from outside. The laughter of dozens of people. He. Emma leaned against the wall. Her breathing was rapid. Then, the closet in the room opened automatically. Kriwak. It was completely dark inside. But something was moving in that darkness. Emma slowly got closer. And then, she saw. Inside the closet was a woman sitting, covered in blood, and there was no skin on her body, only red flesh. But the scariest thing, she was still alive. She was breathing slowly. Her eyes were wide with fear. Please, she spoke with difficulty. They're back. Emma started to tremble. What happened to you? Tears started to flow from the woman's eyes. They wear our skins. Suddenly, she looked towards the door in fear. Oh God, they found you. At that moment, the lights in the room went out. Complete darkness. Then, someone whispered right behind Emma. Nice skin. Emma turned around screaming. But there was nothing there. The next moment, there was the sound of something falling from the ceiling. Splat. Emma looked up, and she screamed. Dozens of humanoid creatures were hanging upside down on the ceiling. Different human skins were sewn onto their bodies. Some had their faces half open. Some had their arms tied up upside down. And some still had fresh blood flowing down their faces. They were all silently looking at Emma. Then a creature slowly descended from the ceiling. On its face. Emma's face. Exactly the same. She smiled. I wear this better. Emma started screaming hysterically. She ran towards the door. But as soon as she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. when she saw the scene outside. The entire motel had changed. In the corridor, dozens of skinless people were chained to the walls. They were still alive. They were moving slowly. Some were crying. Some were asking for their skin back. Please give it back. It hurts. On the walls of the corridor, the same sentence was written in blood over and over again. The owner needs new faces. Suddenly, a door opened at the end of the corridor, and out of that darkness, the old receptionist came out. But now his true form was visible. He was not human. His body was made of hundreds of faces. Every face was alive,
crying,
screaming, and among all those faces, Emma also saw Ethan's face. Emma, he spoke in a weak voice. Don't let him wear you. The old receptionist smiled slowly and extended his hand. And in his hand, there was a bloody skin like Emma's face. This one will fit perfectly. Suddenly the lights of the entire motel turned red. The siren started to sound. Warning, checkout process initiated. And then, all the skinless people started looking at Emma at once. Black Hollow Motel was actually a living creature, and now it had awakened. The sound of a red siren echoed throughout the motel. Warning, checkout process initiated. Warning, checkout process initiated. Emma stood trembling in the middle of the corridor. In front of her was the old receptionist, but he no longer seemed human. Her body was constantly moving, like hundreds of corpses crawling on top of each other. Faces were screaming under her skin. Some had their eyes popping out. Some were scratching her body from the inside with their nails. And between all those faces, Ethan's face was stuck. Emma, run. He screamed in pain. But the next moment his mouth was pulled back into the flesh. The old receptionist smiled. And all the faces on her body also smiled at the same time. He is part of us now. As if the life left Emma's feet. You, what are you? Suddenly the entire corridor started shaking. The walls started breathing. Yes, breathing. The walls were moving in and out, as if the entire motel was alive. Thump, thump, thump. A huge thud echoed throughout the motel. Emma looked at the wall in fear. Something was moving under the wallpaper. Then, the wall cracked. Crack. Inside was flesh. Living red flesh, which was throbbing. And inside that flesh were human hands trapped. They were slowly moving. Help us. Dozens of voices came out at once. Emma backed away, screaming. But the entire corridor was beginning to change. The floor began to soften.
as if she was standing on flesh.
Blood began to drip from the ceiling, and eyes began to open in the walls. Hundreds of eyes. Everyone was looking at her. The motel. Emma's voice trembled. This place is alive. The old receptionist slowly approached her. This is not a motel,
he whispered.
It's a hungry creature. Suddenly his neck became unnaturally long, and his mouth split open to cover his entire face. And we are part of it. The next moment, the doors on both sides of the corridor opened simultaneously. Bang! Bang! There was a terrifying scene inside each room. In one room, people were burning alive. In another, someone was eating their own face. And in another room, dozens of people were buried alive inside the wall. They all looked at Emma at once. Join us. The entire motel echoed with their voice. Emma started running. The floor was pounding under her feet, as if something huge was alive below. Suddenly the corridor ended, and in front of her was a huge hall. In the middle of the hall, a giant heart was beating. A real heart, at least 20 feet big, connected by black veins. And with each beat, the entire motel was shaking. Thump! Emma's breath stopped. Oh my God! Thousands of human bodies were stuck to the walls around the heart.
Some were still alive.
Some had been half-swallowed, and they were all connected to that heart, as if he was eating them. Suddenly, a voice came from inside that heart. Emma? It was Ethan. Emma immediately moved closer, and then she saw. Ethan's body was half-trapped inside the heart. Black fibers were embedded in his body. He was breathing hard. It feeds on souls.
He spoke in pain.
It lives on the fear of people. Emma started crying. I will get you out of here. Suddenly, the entire hall was plunged into darkness. Then, that voice came again, but this time from every wall, from every floor, from every breath. You cannot take what belongs to me. The whole hall started shaking. The heart started beating fast. Thump, thump, thump. And then, the flesh above the heart started to split. Crack! A huge eye opened from inside. Such an eye that couldn't be human. Hundreds of faces were screaming inside its shell. That eye was looking straight at Emma. Then the whole motel spoke together. I am Black Hollow. Suddenly, long fleshy hands emerged from the floor. They started to grab Emma. Emma backed away screaming. But the next moment, one hand grabbed her leg. Then another. Then a third. They slowly started dragging her towards that giant heart. And oh! Ethan screamed, but black fibers penetrated her mouth. Suddenly, Emma's eyes fell on a nearby fire axe. It was probably kept for emergency. She freed herself with all her strength and picked up the axe. The entire motel started shaking with anger. Don't! That giant voice echoed. But Emma ran towards the heart screaming, and with all her strength, the axe stabbed into that heart. Schhhhkk. The entire hall shook. Black blood burst from the heart. A scream echoed. That was not human, but it was from the entire motel. The walls started to crack. The roof started to collapse. And all the trapped people started screaming together. It's dying. Suddenly, that giant eye turned straight towards Emma, and all the faces inside her said in unison, If I die, you die with me. Then, the entire floor collapsed, and Emma began to fall straight into the darkness. As she fell, she saw for the last time, Ethan was reaching out to her, and behind him, the entire Black Hollow motel was twisting like living flesh. Even after dawn, the motel wasn't finished. Emma kept falling into the darkness, screaming, down, and down, and down. It seemed as if there was no limit to her fall. There was only blackness all around, but inside that darkness, thousands of voices were whispering, Stay, don't leave us. You belong here. Suddenly, crash. Emma hit something hard. Her breath stopped. For a few seconds, she just lay on the ground, gasping. Then slowly, she opened her eyes. She was in a long tunnel. The walls were made of flesh, alive, throbbing, and human faces were trapped inside them. Those faces were moving slowly. Some were crying. Some were just staring blankly at Emma. Suddenly, a face emerged from the wall. It was Ethan. Emma, he spoke in a weak voice. Emma immediately moved towards him. Ethan, but as soon as he wanted to touch it, the wall pulled Ethan's face back in. And the next moment, a terrifying thud echoed throughout the tunnel. Thump, thump, thump. A dim white light could be seen at the end of the tunnel. Emma staggered towards it. As she got closer, the whispers grew louder. Don't go. You'll become one of us. It never lets anyone leave. Suddenly, there was a sound of something moving behind her. Emma turned around immediately, and her body went limp. The entire tunnel was moving. People trapped inside the walls were trying to get out. Dozens of hands were coming out, tearing flesh. And between them, that old receptionist was there. But now his true form was fully revealed. He was not human. He was a giant pile of flesh, bones, and faces. Thousands of arms were coming out of his body. And at the end of each arm were different human faces. They were all screaming together. You cannot leave. Emma ran towards the light with all her might. The tunnel began to close behind her. The walls of flesh were coming together. Thousands of hands were trying to grab her feet. One hand grabbed her arm. The other grabbed her hair. Emma screamed in pain, but she freed herself with all her might. The light was now right in front of her, only a few steps away. From behind, the giant creature was crawling through the entire tunnel towards her. Emma! Her voice echoed throughout the tunnel. Emma made her final leap. And flash. Emma opened her eyes, breathing heavily. It was morning. She was lying on the side of Highway 66. The rain had stopped. The sun had come out. The birds were chirping. Everything seemed normal. Emma sat up, panting. Her clothes were covered in blood, but the motel
Was gone.
there was nothing there, only empty forest. Tears began to flow from Emma's eyes. Ethan, she had broken down. After a while, a police car pulled up there. 2 officers got out.
Ma'am.
Are you okay? Emma couldn't speak. She just stared at the forest. 3 days later, Emma was sitting in a hospital. The police didn't believe her. According to them, there had never been a motel there. There was no record of the Black Hollow Motel on Highway 66. Not on maps. Not in old files. Nothing. But Emma knew that place was real. Every night she had the same dreams, the same screams, the same heartbeats. Thump, thump. And at the end of every dream, she would hear Ethan's voice. Emma, it's still alive. One night, Emma suddenly woke up from her sleep. She felt like someone was in her room. The room was plunged into darkness. Then, she looked. A man was standing in the corner of the room. Tall, shadow-like, and his eyes were completely black. A cold wave ran through Emma's body. Who is it? The thing slowly came into the light. Emma screamed. It was Ethan, but not completely. His skin was torn in places, and something was moving inside his body, as if several people were alive inside him. Ethan slowly raised his head and smiled. The same inhuman smile. You left without checking out. Emma started to back away. No. Suddenly, black smoke began to come out of Ethan's mouth. And within that smoke, dozens of faces began to appear. They all said together, Black Hollow never ends. Suddenly, the entire room was plunged into darkness. Then, only one sound was heard. Knock, knock, knock. Someone was knocking on Emma's bedroom door.
Slowly.
Continuously. And then, blood started to seep in from under the door. Emma's breathing stopped. The words slowly began to form in that blood. Welcome back, Emma. At that moment, the lights of the entire city went out. And somewhere far away, in the desolate forest of Highway 66, an old neon sign lit up again. Black Hollow Motel. Vacancy available. And that night, for the first time, people heard that hundreds of people were laughing together from deep within the forest.